Chapter 891. Inviting the Lord. Your Highness, be careful. Tyr. The world before his eyes was a complete chaos. Upside down, shifting left and right. A heavy hum rang in his ears. Amidst the haziness, Antilocos tried to open his eyes. But at this moment, he felt as though he was carrying a weight of 10,000 caddies, unable to move his body an inch. What is this? After an unknown amount of time, leaning against the deck, the prince finally regained a bit of his ability to move. He struggled to prop himself up and then surveyed the surroundings. There were sounds of slaughter, screams, but no sight of the enemy. Beams of light piercing through the fog rose and fell, bringing endless explosions to the sea. Even on the flagship where Antilocos was, there were several huge holes and mast poles that had long since broken. All the current situations were telling the prince that the state of affairs at sea was likely grim. Ugh! Holding his forehead, looking at everything before him, Antilocos recalled what had just happened. He had been urgently informing the fleet to continue dispersing the formation, to evade the Athens crystal cannons that were of unexplainably high accuracy. However, at that moment, 6 strong beams of energy shot from the Athenian ranks, straight toward the warship where the prince was. If it were only one shot, Antilocos believed he could block it, which was why he had dared to come to the front line. As long as he wasn't targeted by a barrage of fire, his life would not be in danger. But obviously, under this precise combined strike that seemed to have the eyes of God, there was nowhere for the prince to escape. Fortunately, the power of demigods comes from their bloodline, so they often can burst forth with exceptionally strong potential at the brink of life and death. So at this crucial moment, Antilocos still blocked the attack. But the cost was clear. He was directly knocked unconscious by the huge impact, only waking up now. And the soldiers that had been around him at the time were probably reduced to dust. The deputy officer. Right, the deputy officer. Come to me quickly. Finally a bit clearer, the prince forced himself to stand up from the deck. Blessed by the sea god's bloodline, he could barely see a short distance around him. The enemy had not yet launched a real offensive, but their own formation was already completely disrupted. Antilocos didn't know how the Athenians had managed this. But what was clear was that if he didn't do something, his kingdom would be shamed by him. Your Highness, I am over here. You've finally woken up. As the prince's call fell, a response immediately came from afar. Soon, the deputy officer, a general, ran over with a look of surprise on his face. But Antilocos could see the other's somewhat ragged clothes and bleeding arm. Clearly, this general had also come under attack. But he probably faced nothing as dangerous, so the outcome was much better. Your Highness, after you fainted, I tried to wake you up, but to no success. To protect your safety, I have already ordered to slow down our pace. The Athenian attacks are too precise, but we still hold a numerical advantage. General, listen to me. Interrupting, his head was again hit with a bout of dizziness. Mustering his spirit, Antilocos spoke in a deep voice. Now lead our people and retreat. What? In disbelief, the general from Pylos obviously did not expect such a conclusion. However, the prince merely nodded, affirming his decision. Yes, retreat. There's no need to continue fighting. The level they are displaying now has already negated our geographical advantage. If we continue to fight, even if we win, it would only be a Pyrrhic victory. General, our mission was to gain benefits, not to fight to the death. Besides, our greatest reliance has never been ourselves, has it not? As a descendant of Poseidon, unlike Athena who almost never descended in person to help Athenians in battle, Poseidon was quite willing to spread his power and fame through divine descending. So with a nod, his deputy understood his meaning. You mean, notify those priests that we no longer have the capability to maintain the safety of the scene, and all of this is due to the Athenian assault. How they handle things is for them to decide. But either way, they will report everything to the deities. Stroking his forehead, the prince waved his hand. The decision was made, but there was a proper way to retreat. Simply retreating back to Pylos wouldn't do. It was best to take a detour, to the north or perhaps to the south. After all, the Athenians were unlikely to try to attack their homeland. They did not come to seize land. So Antilochos just needed to find an excuse to hide, and then come back to clean up the mess. We go north, towards the south. But that's where the rumored palace of the Sea Emperor is located. Remember to dodge it. We set off now. The explosions around continued, and the prince originally intended to head north, not accidentally retreat right in front of the sea god. But for some reason, Antilochos had a mysterious premonition that he should go south. South then, it's not a big deal. As a traditional human of chaos, both a detractor and supporter of fatalism, Antilochos still trusted his own intuition. Chapter 892 please, my lord _2. Tap tap. Walking along the long corridor of the palace, the old sea god's movements were neither rushed nor slow. He surreptitiously sized up the furnishings around him, those glittering gold ornaments. This place once belonged to the territory of the ancient sea god, but then it was ceded to Poseidon, as a compensation for the errors committed through the sea power wielded by his sister. And with the change of its master, its furnishings also got a complete makeover. Those sculptures, which exuded an ancient charm, had long vanished, replaced by all kinds of extravagant and colorful decorations. The pillars, originally crafted from fallen stars from the dawn of creation, had been replaced by pure white jade stationed everywhere, and various minerals born from the earth concave at the beginning of time had also been removed from this place. Nereus couldn't describe this change as either good or bad, but looking at this unfamiliar hall, he could never possibly feel happy. Your Highness. Right, there's also this. Nodding slightly, Nereus signaled to the humanoid scorpion guard. On him, the essence of Poseidon's divine blood was so clearly discernible. It was easy to imagine what the second son of Cronus must have done within this ancient palace. But since this place rightfully belongs to him now, Nereus just looked around and said nothing more. Tap tap. Continuing forward, he pushed open the final grand door and entered the inner sanctum. Before him, the nominal master of the seas was sitting on a throne cast from gold. Gulping down the dark red nectar, and as if he heard some noise, Poseidon's blurred vision lifted slightly. It was only when he saw who it was that the Sea Emperor, somewhat surprised, wiped his mouth and forced himself to appear somewhat more spirited. Nereus, it's you. What brings you here? Wait. Don't tell me. Has something happened at Olympus? No, that's not it. It's been very quiet recently, at least for me. So, is it those disgusting evil creatures again? Ever since Typhon's death, there always seems to be trouble cropping up every so often. Poseidon, speculatively guessing, didn't think that there had been anything recently that should concern him. To this, the old sea god just smiled and shook his head gently. Not at all, strictly speaking, it's a matter of the mortal realm. The mortal realm? His blurry eyes narrowed slightly, and with a touch of drunkenness, the Sea Emperor stopped filtering out certain sounds. Normally, to not obstruct his own indulgence, Poseidon didn't really listen to the prayers of his believers, but the next moment his expression soured. Sacrificial. Ceremony. Invasion. What a bunch of incompetence. To think they let someone get so close to them during a ceremony in my homage, and as my believers, they were utterly defeated at sea. Nereus, do I really need to deal with such matters myself? This matter does involve Princess Athena, and such situations. Hey! With a gentle smile, the old sea god didn't finish his sentence. Nevertheless, Poseidon understood his implication. Over the years, whenever it came to matters concerning Olympus, this elder rarely got involved. In the end, it was always left to him to resolve. Athena. I understand. My clever niece isn't the type to come stir up trouble at sea intentionally. After a moment of contemplation, Poseidon found the answer. Not every action in the mortal realm was orchestrated by deities. In fact, wars initiated by humans themselves accounted for a larger portion. Like this time, Through the prayers of his believers, Poseidon knew that it was actually they who instigated it. This wasn't an issue at first. If not for the presence of Theseus, the Athenians never should have had a foothold at sea in the first place. The start of a war was fine, but it's unforgivable that not only could they not win, but they also allowed the ceremony to worship him to be disrupted. Even the deity of chaos, on account of a display of power, had wiped out entire clans more than once. So, for the destruction of his own worship, naturally Poseidon had to respond. "All right, Nereus, I am now aware of the matter. Since you're so timid, then you may stay here. I will handle this myself." With a beckoning motion, he gripped the trident in his hand. Poseidon shook his head, dispelling the drunken stupor from his body. The last time he had clashed with that human named Theseus was only a divine descending incarnation of himself. Holding the true divine artifact, meant for battle, Poseidon wouldn't lose, but unfortunately, that time the human also got hold of Athena's aegis, the guardian shield for the city of Athens. He had to admit his trident could not break that shield, and that human also had some skill. But Athena's divine artifact wasn't something just anyone could wield. In 1,000 years, aside from being lent to Perseus on Zeus's orders, only a very few individuals could handle it. However, Theseus was already dead, and Poseidon didn't think he'd come across another. Even if there was someone else who could pick it up, it didn't mean they could exert the same level of strength as that human. Swoosh! Leaping into the air, a trace of cruel smile flickered on Poseidon's face. A post-drink digestion, quite a good activity. Just right, he could also use this as a lesson to those mortals. Gods can fail countless times, but humans are different. Even if that mortal was extraordinary, he only has to fail once, and all his brilliant achievements will turn to nothing. Chapter 893, Into the Jar. Divine light burst forth from the sea, rising from the palace in the southern sea, and hurriedly made its way towards the northeast. Poseidon knew that it was impossible for him to quickly reach the waters near the kingdom of Pylus in the mortal realm. Unless he descended as a divine avatar through a faith anchor point in the space, by the time he arrived at the scene, the sea war would probably have already ended. Nevertheless, even though he knew he would be late, Poseidon did not try other solutions. As for the reasons, they were rather simple. Without a suitable vessel, if a deity wanted to descend merely through rituals spontaneously performed by believers, even for him, it would still be a considerable burden. Moreover, the avatar created in this way would have a significant gap in strength, and his own divine artifact could not be carried over. To pay such a price for a group of mortals who were more trouble than they were worth was naturally not something Poseidon was willing to do. If they survive, then it's their good fortune. If they do not survive, then it's the price they pay for their incompetence. At most, in consideration of your devout faith, I will make your death a bit more meaningful. Those mortals from Athens, not a single one will be allowed to return. Standing on the waves, with his trident in hand, the blue-haired man stood at the forefront of the tide. The fierce storm framed his cold smile. Poseidon was in a very good mood. Since the kingdoms on the continent had decided to oppose Athens by divine decree, he had also received a letter from Hera. The heavenly empress wished for him to launch a joint offensive from the sea, but Poseidon had no intention of being the spearhead. To find a chance to reclaim the power of the sea would be fine, but to attack Athens to try to draw out Athena's methods? He was not that foolish. However, Hera was not someone easily dealt with. So today he simply made a show of compliance. To do something, anything, was better than to have her continually bother him. Sigh. It's indeed a wonderful day. Though I am feeling a bit sleepy. Gigantic waves hundreds of meters high churned beneath him. As the initial excitement passed, gradually, the spirit of Poseidon on the tide head began to wane. Perhaps because he drank too much nectar earlier, for a moment Poseidon felt a tad drowsy. Yawning, at this moment, Poseidon regretted not riding the divine steed that shared his bloodline. If he had it, his journey would be much more comfortable. Sigh. Ah. Sigh. The color of the sky gradually changed, until the moon rose in the east. On the tides, gradually, Poseidon closed his eyes. As the night descended, the drowsiness from the earlier nectar became increasingly intense. After a struggle that was not too difficult, Poseidon eventually decided to nap a while, to slow his progress. Anyway, no matter how you calculated it, his speed was much faster than that of humans. Even if it were slower for a while during the night, it wouldn't hinder his ultimate purpose. Let's just leave it at that. Sigh. Sigh. In the night sky, as Poseidon slept soundly, only the trident of the Sea Emperor continued to shine with a pale blue divine light, guarding by his side. As a divine artifact once born to uphold the trajectory of destiny, it couldn't compare to Zeus's lightning, but it was still extraordinary. On that day, through the hands of the Cyclops, the sea god cast his godhood of tsunami. In some sense, the trident was the proof and medium of Poseidon's position as the sea god. By comparison, earthquake and storm didn't have such a direct connection to the sea. And in the following years, Poseidon further infused it with a certain power gathered from his many offspring of the Sea Clan. This made the divine artifact increasingly powerful and gradually endowed it with a hint of spirituality. A divine artifact with a vague consciousness. In a certain sense, it is indeed a fine weapon. Judging by its quality alone, its current state might be a bit better than my flute. Unfortunately, this weapon, so closely tied to him, is destined to be unusable by me. Flapping wings, a faint gray airflow descended from the sky. The ash-haired youth stood in the heavens, looking down at the moving tide head below. Thousands of years in the mortal realm, for him, had already been an unknown length of time. And after such a long passage of time, he once thought he had forgotten this memory. Hypnos, the god of sleep, the lord of the third layer of nine-layered hell, was also a legitimate deity of the current world. Once again basking in the moonlight of the mortal realm, the appearance of the young god remained the same, only his identity had long been different. Step, step, walking through the sky, Hypnos was not in any hurry as he watched the Sea Emperor gradually fall asleep. The power to induce eternal sleep diffused in the sky, settling little by little upon Poseidon. In terms of a head-to-head confrontation, Hypnos might not necessarily be Poseidon's match. Even if his divine power was strong, his godhood destined that he could hardly defeat an enemy. But in his area of expertise, everything was different. Even the former divine king of trajectories couldn't escape this fate, and neither could Poseidon. However, Hypnos was also aware that such absolute authority also brought with it absolute flaws. I can put him to sleep, but not harm him. If I want to attack him, I only have one opportunity to strike first. It's just as well. Even as the god of sleep, I can't let someone sleep through a life-threatening crisis or pain. If it weren't for the artifact that human gave me, I really wouldn't be able to take him away. Guarded by the trident, Hypnos couldn't touch the sleeping Sea Emperor without making a move, and naturally, he wouldn't be able to take him away directly. Chapter 894. Entering the Urn_2. Fortunately, on this trip he also obtained a special aid. A bottle of poison that even he couldn't help but feel frightened of. Hypnos didn't know how such a terrifying thing came to be. After all, in the Chaos world, there had never been a powerful deity who governed poison. But that didn't matter anymore. Taking out the transparent bottle, the god of sleep carefully lifted the cap. There were no signs of leaks. Even without the seal of the cap, the illusory liquid inside didn't spill over. Only the surrounding space trembled slightly, as if even it could not bear the terrifying toxicity. Tilting the bottle slightly, the flute by his waist played a melodious tune without any wind. Hypnos noticed that Poseidon's eyelids twitched, then settled back to calm. Clearly, some dangerous forewarning had stirred Poseidon's spirit. Even in his sleep, he still felt unrest. Yet, under the full effort of the god of sleep, he did not awaken after all. Seeing this, Hypnos finally put his heart at ease. Good. Smiling and nodding, under the corresponding sky of the tides, the young deity tilted his right hand one last time. The transparent mist, like a wisp of blue smoke, paused at the mouth of the bottle 3 times, then fell. Curiosity flashed in his eyes. Despite not daring to touch it, Hypnos was curious. What effects this so-called poison would have. Sea Emperor, Poseidon, that is. Come. Let me see what you are capable of. Following the strategy laid out by the Lord of Hell, the serpent of the central court in the 9-layered hell had mentioned, there were several key points he had to pay attention to on this journey. The first was how to defeat Poseidon without attracting attention. The second was how to prepare under the desperate struggle of the Sea Emperor. Once realizing he was no match, Poseidon would likely burst out his divine power recklessly, fighting desperately. By then, the only one who could subdue him again instantly was the Lord of Hell himself. But now his presence has been marked by the divine king of the current age. The moment he makes a move, Zeus would arrive instantly after one move. What I have to do is to bring the post-outburst Poseidon back to hell. Doing such a thing in front of a great divine power, just thinking about it is thrilling. With a smile, the young deity's expression didn't change in the slightest. Kidding, even when facing his own creator in the past, Hypnos had never felt fear. In comparison, the current divine king, what could he really amount to? The long night wanders, sleepless. At the summit of Mount Olympus, Zeus was taking a stroll in the woods. Not long ago, goddess of rainbow Iris had told him that the Fates, who had visited him a short while ago, had gone to the mortal realm and then headed east. But listening to her answer, Zeus was not satisfied. There's no initiative. If I do not say, would you just not do it? Who she met, what she did, and what she plans to do, just to kill a mortal thousands of miles away. Ridiculous. He sighed deeply. At this moment, Zeus kind of missed Zephyrus. As his most loyal subject, the god of west wind would not make such mistakes. He was not without flaws, but most of the time he could understand what Zeus meant. Whether it was things Zeus could not explicitly say due to his position as divine king, Zephyrus could accomplish them. By comparison, when he said to covertly protect the powerless Fates, Iris actually went to protect her. That is, without piercing through the power of fate, to prevent them from knowing what I have said. Even in private, I cannot clearly reveal my intentions. His eyes shifted. To this day, Zeus had never truly let down his guard against fate. A divine king who does not wish to conquer fate is not a good king. Though he has taken another path, if he can find a breakthrough elsewhere, Zeus would still not give up. Walking and pondering, the divine king was not in a hurry. As of now, there was little in the mortal realm that he could not do. The once distant lands were nothing more to him, if Zeus were willing to unleash all his strength. As long as it was within the reach of his sovereign power, the vastness of heaven and earth would just be commonplace. However, everything is going smoothly at present. He would eventually achieve his wishes. Therefore, such power, the divine king had not had the opportunity to use for a long time. The only exception was those 2 indeterminate beings in the abyss. Don't give me the opportunity. If the beings from beyond enter the current world, then you will only be seen as invaders by the world's law. At that time, I will be able to exert all my strength without hindrance. And you, on the other hand, will be suppressed by the law. In Tartarus, he might have lost the initiative by being careless. But if it came to the outside world, then the tables would be turned. Hands behind his back, the divine king admired the moonlight above. Now he was just waiting for an opportunity. Waiting for Silver Moon City to cause trouble, waiting for all gods to be no match, and then he would step in to suppress everything. Waiting for the sea god lineage to erupt in conflict with Athens, even with Silver Moon City. If not, he would find ways to fuel the fire. And then, if there is a chance, to involve the underworld as well, only he hadn't figured out how yet. And in the midst of all these processes, as soon as the great divine power of any party couldn't resist intervening, then he could laugh thrice and, under the enhancement of the mortal realm's laws, crush or drag it to an overwhelming victory. Thinking about it now, I'm quite looking forward to it. I wonder who will make the first move. Abyss, Spirit Realm, or the long-lurking Mother Earth, who would never give up causing him trouble. Zeus didn't know. As a god, the perception of time is different. It shouldn't take too long to unveil the mystery. Chapter 895. Snatching Food. The moonlight shrouded the sea, a silvery white. Waves on the tide, caught between half-dream and half-awake. Like mortals, drifting in the ocean of dreams, Poseidon couldn't tell if this was reality or illusion. Standing on the fantasized Mount Olympus, he stepped towards the highest throne inside the Golden Palace. A blurry Zeus watched him with reluctance, yet could only relinquish the power in his hands. Yes, this was Poseidon's dream. If he had to choose one thing he most wanted to realize, it would probably be to sit on the divine king's throne. His heartbeat gradually quickened. At this moment, Poseidon felt his long-held wish was fulfilled. "Hey, can you hear me? That big blue guy. It seems you're in trouble." Slightly startled, if this voice had suddenly appeared in reality, Poseidon would definitely be instantly alert. But this was his dream. Dreams are absurd, lacking logic even for a god. Thus, the Sea Emperor, immersed in his self-awareness, showed no excessive reaction. He merely looked towards the source of the voice. In a corner of the Golden Palace, hanging on the wall in a painting, Poseidon saw a white dragon. As their eyes met, the Sea Emperor inexplicably started to feel irritable. A sense of tension quietly rose, and the sea god in the dream abruptly stood up. Despite his thoughts still being chaotic, Poseidon instinctively maintained his identity within the dream. "Ridiculous. Even Zeus is not my rival. What trouble could there be in this world that could harm me? Just scaremongering, mere mortal. I think it's you who has gotten into trouble. This is Olympus, and I am its master. Having seen the divine king, why not bow?" The voice grew louder, with echoes swirling inside the Golden Palace. The entire Mount of the Gods seemed to shake along, reflecting the majesty of the Sea Emperor. However, before Poseidon's eyes, the white dragon just tilted its head, its crystal-like eyes reflecting some confusion. She didn't understand what he was saying, nor was she interested in the divine king. She simply felt in the dream the presence of a familiar being she only knew from one encounter. Through the reflections in her pupils, the white dragon faintly saw a youth with gray wings, seemingly giving a meaningful smile to this blue-haired fellow. All right, since you asked, I'll just leave then, but I'll take your dream. Big fellows like you rarely delve deep into the domain of dreams. My collection just got bigger." The young voice sang out. The white dragon shook her head. In her eyes, there were never any Mount of the Gods or Golden Palace, just a quietly sleeping blue giant. In the realm of dreams, strength does not necessarily imply size, but size certainly implies strength. And only the dreams of the strong can become anchors, continually expanding the breadth of the world. "Goodbye, big guy." Wings flapping, the white dragon turned and disappeared into the ocean depicted in the painting, leaving Poseidon alone, blankly watching where she vanished. Suddenly appearing, then just as suddenly disappearing, the Poseidon in the dream didn't understand what had happened, but the sense of panic in his heart worsened. Memories in dreams never last more than 3 seconds, and only special beings can stay lucid in dreams. Hence, without much thought, the Sea Emperor quickly dismissed this interlude. He fruitlessly searched, but could never find the reason for his own panic. From an unseen angle, gray and white feathers fell like chains, firmly stabilizing this imagined Olympus. Sleep and dreams always go hand in hand. On this false Mount of the Gods, blossoms of somnus flowers opened one after another, turning this place into a sea of flowers. The sense of alarm in his heart grew stronger, yet Poseidon never managed to awaken. A god's instinct is not omnipotent, at least it cannot counter the tangible strength and authority of another deity. Gradually, the blue giant drifted atop the dazzling sea of bubbles, slowly sinking downward. The deeper he went, the more magical and eerie the surrounding bubbles became. In the surreal dreamscape, Poseidon continued to be mesmerized. It was that dragon, reality above the ocean tide, eyes slightly flickering. Just then, like the white dragon, through Poseidon as a medium, Hypnos also felt a familiar power. dream, and mind. The former was his domain, the latter, a power he longed for but couldn't attain. So, is this dragon the new overseer of the third layer of the spirit realm? Seems quite brainless. How could such a fool compare to him? Under her charge, the dream spirit realm's progress would probably stall even more. A special emotion surged in his chest, and the inherently cold evil god clutched at his chest. He didn't want to see that dragon. If not for the current matters, Hypnos would likely have insisted on meeting her. Huff, momentarily restraining his impulses. Exhaling deeply, Hypnos once again submerged into the vast sea of dreams. White dragon, there will be a chance in the future. At that time, I'll let you know who is the most qualified guardian of the dream realm. But for now, I'll deal with you first. Poseidon, eyes gazing at the dispersing mist, his fluctuating mind again composed. Chapter 896. Snatching food _2. The god of sleep slightly lowered his eyelids, his caution reaching an extreme. Before his eyes, as time passed, the poisonous fog that could corrode space finally descended and touched the hem of the Sea Emperor's robe. Without the slightest stir, as if endowed with life itself, the hazy fog seeped through the 7 orifices of the slumbering Sea Emperor. Hypnos watched, in an instant, as if eons had passed in that very moment. The visage of Poseidon began to decay, turning sallow, gradually dissolving into ruin and collapse. Bare bones revealed through the face, as dark red liquid flowed from the empty eye sockets. At first, the sleeping Sea Emperor seemed not to sense it, his perception as if numbed, until the decay continuously spread, reaching his internal organs and bones, and even along some pathway, began to corrode relatives closest to his bloodline. The pain finally invaded the mind, eyes snapping open, the bone-piercing agony instantly breaking the limits of Hypnos's power. Upon awakening, the Sea Emperor attempted to locate the enemy. But at this moment, Poseidon no longer had eyes. Above the vast sea, the faceless, skeletal deity wailed miserably. His facial features had already peeled off, and though the essence of the sea constantly healed his wounds, the overflowing divinity in his white bones was still visibly decaying and yellowing. Brown spots emerged on the white bones, flaking and crumbling away layer by layer. The corner of his eye twitching slightly, Hypnos, concealing his own presence, silently watched this horrifying scene. The power of this toxin was unimaginably potent. Even he would not fare well if contaminated. Yet the god of sleep did not rush to act, knowing this was not his time to enter the fray. With the current state of his strength, the divine body of Poseidon was destined to be exhausted by this terrible toxin. Therefore, at this moment, the only choice he could make was one. Who is it? Who exactly is it? You dare to scheme against me, yet you do not dare to face me? Come out! Come out! Suddenly waking up, but leaving the dream elsewhere. The Sea Emperor roared in anger, a massive rift continuously opening and closing on his flesh-writhing face, but only his voice carried on over the vast sea. Time trickled away, yet the Sea Emperor's roars ended fruitlessly. At some point, whether regaining rationality or giving up the struggle entirely, Poseidon, whose divine body had already been half corroded by the toxin, abruptly stood still above the sea surface, and the poison that had been rampaging, at last, halted its corrosion. Turning a seemingly slow yet swift round, even without eyes, Poseidon looked towards the direction of the god of sleep. At this moment, it was as if a terrifying force had descended upon the world once again, and the entire sea quieted down. Whether it was Pontus slumbering on the ocean floor or the Lord of Ocean in the distant seas, almost at the same moment, they all felt this power coming from the southeast of the world. After so many years passed, Poseidon once again wielded the strength of a deity in the mortal realm. And this time he held nothing back. Ha ha ha. Good. Good. It does not matter anymore. None of it matters. Whoever you are, no matter who, I will make you pay the price. The piercing voice echoed over the sea, and the ultimate emotion was the ultimate strength of an innate deity. Only the most extreme emotions could bring them closest to the primal, closest to the instinctual, returning to the authority granted by the world. Thus, even unable to see, Poseidon still locked onto the position of the god of sleep. He did not know who the other party was or why they schemed against him, but he no longer cared. No one could humiliate him like this. Even if suppressed at the bottom of the sea for 10,000 years, even if to kill 10,000 enemies at the cost of injuring 30,000, he, Poseidon, was determined to make the audacious villain pay the price. Clang! Under the ceaseless infusion of powerful divine power, the trident of the Sea Emperor resonated with a metallic ring. Boundless waves churned over the vast sea, and in a brief moment, more than one island in the East Sea was overturned. Carrying the formidable momentum of half the East Sea, it condensed the earth-shaking might of a deity. The sharp divine artifact tore through everything in its path, charging unstoppably toward the direction of Hypnos. "Ah! Die for me!" A fierce bellow echoed across the sea and the sky. Even Hypnos, facing the divine weapon that rent the air, was moved. Before, he had heard numerous jokes about Poseidon. But at least with this strike, even if he himself exerted divine power, it would be enough to injure him. Heh! Extreme emotion, extreme strength. This is the innate sacredness of innate gods. What a pity! In the face of truly unrivaled might, what can your anger change? Without dodging, nor moving a single step, Hypnos watched the chilling light of the incoming trident with a cold smile at the corner of his mouth. The space of the present world twisted slowly before it, but the god of sleep was not at all panicked. Because in the next moment, right in front of Hypnos, the space of the present world shattered thunderously. Indescribable darkness and voids, an unspeakable shadow slid down from within, colliding with the tip of the trident of the Sea Emperor. There was no earth-shattering noise, nor a spectacle of brilliant colors. Only the instantaneous dissolution of Poseidon's divine body and the indelible divinity attached to the trident. Crack! Boom! Not just tens of thousands of miles away, in that instant, nearly all the temples that worshipped Poseidon collapsed at the same time. Conversely, the devout believers who worshipped him lost their lives in a flash. Within the kingdom of Pylus, where the bloodline of the Sea Emperor remained, endless water surged onto the island, and the vibrations of the earth resounded through the heavens. This was not a subjective act of the Lord of Hell. His eyes held no mortals. It was simply that when the extreme emotion of an innate god was shattered, what followed was the turmoil of his authority. In a higher and more distant place, the uncontrollable power of the Earthshaker reached the continent's core, and thousands of miles of coastline were crushed to dust. Countless lives met death, and more rivers redirected, mountains collapsed. This was the consequence of the Sea Emperor's authority being destabilized by powerful divine power, and it was just the tip of the iceberg. However, in the next moment, Hypnos sensed that the laws of this world were finally responding. But the part that should have fallen on Poseidon was instantly redirected. In matters of urgency, to the laws of the world, things deserving of its attention are also prioritized. The Sea Emperor, who violated order, will surely be punished by rigid rules. But here, something more urgently requiring its suppression emerged. Now is the time. A cold voice rang in Hypnos' ear. The god of sleep had no time to respond as he immediately took a step out. His own divine power, augmented by the strength of the third layer's Lord of Hell, was released without reservation. To the worldly laws, just like Poseidon, he couldn't concern himself with them at the moment, so Hypnos was not afraid at all. What truly demanded his immediate attention was the boundless supreme might that rose mightily from the east in the very next moment. How dare you, venturing into the mortal realm? The divine king had yet to arrive, but his voice was already here. With no time to spare, Hypnos reached out for the trident. However, at this moment Poseidon, who had just been severely damaged, suddenly burst forth with a powerful divine strength, slowing down the god of sleep for a fraction of a second. Swoosh! In the next instant, the outstretched right hand clenched fiercely. Without surprise, Poseidon's existence was grasped in Hypnos' hand. His divine body may have been eroded away, but this was the confluence of his godhood and undying essence. Yet in just that brief moment, the power released by Poseidon ultimately had some effect. Right in front of the god of sleep, the trident of the Sea Emperor soared into the air, heading in the direction he had originally intended to go. Chapter 897, Three-Headed Dog and Contract. Swish! Involuntarily, his left hand reached out, only to grasp at thin air. In just an instant, the trident of the Sea Emperor plummeted into the seabed before the eyes of the god of sleep and then vanished without a trace. This divine artifact, initially forged by the divine authority of Tsunami, merged with the sea surface in an instant and then withdrew from this place fraught with peril. Even if Hypnos' divine power greatly surpassed it, he could only vaguely discern the direction in which the other party had fled. But no one could retrieve the divine artifact deliberately concealed by the sea god, unless chaos could give birth to a supreme being truly wielding dominion over ocean and water. Moreover, at this very moment, an immense sense of alarm had already assaulted the heart of the god of sleep. The divine king of the present world was about to arrive, and if he dared to delay any further, he might not be able to escape. Even now, he could feel that indescribable pressure. With a flip of his palm, Hypnos sent Poseidon's existence directly into the temporal rift torn open by the serpent of the central court and then turned to leave. This rift led straight to the Nine Hells, a passage maintained by planar forces. As long as Poseidon entered here, his task would be considered complete. As for why he didn't go in himself, naturally it was because he couldn't enter at all. Tartarus! He dashed into the sea, arriving at a fissure that led directly to the gateway to the underworld. On land as well as the seabed, there are many such fissures, and no matter from which location one descends, the final destination would either be the subterranean world or the gates of the underworld. Taking a detour through the underworld to return to Hell was the only way for Hypnos to go back. The reason was simple. As a lord with command over a layer of Hell's plane's force, the god of sleep would be instinctively rejected by the abyss. Just as the twin planes would not target the sea god or this contemporary deity fundamentally akin to a sacrifice, it did not mean they would allow Hypnos free access in and out. Thus, if the god of sleep wished to travel between Hell and the mortal realm, he could either go through the portal of the underworld or hold a grand sacrificial ceremony substantial enough in the mortal realm to shield against the abyss's perception, or possess strength powerful enough to disregard the instincts of Tartarus. However, for Hypnos at this moment, there was clearly only one option. That was to take the legitimate gateway, traversing the great gates of the underworld. Hiss! It seemed like a long time had passed, yet from the moment Poseidon took action, it was just a momentary affair. The divine artifact transformed into divine light and escaped through the seawater, and the young deity too had left the mortal realm. On the vast ocean, only a silhouette bathed in the moonlight remained. Without substance, it was merely a manifestation of power. The dark shadow slithered, spiraling from southeast to northwest across the earth. Under the pillars far to the extreme west, the Titan holding up the sky slightly bowed his head and also perceived the fleeting shadow and hiss. Whoosh! The void trembled. In the next moment, the clear sky was blanketed with dark clouds, as if the heavens were furious. Crossing half the continent, bringing along countless silver serpents, Zeus arrived over this restless ocean. The residual divine power and will of Poseidon should have stirred up storms and torrential rain hereafter without cease. But when two supreme beings arrived in succession, even the most defiant of seas must calm. It's you again. Where is Poseidon? What have you done to him? Who gave you the audacity to dare plot against my brother, against the principal god of Olympus? Thunder rumbled without pause, emitting deafening booms. The late-arriving divine king looked down from the sky at the ocean, his aura firmly locking on the indiscernible ancient serpent. He refrained from striking, for Zeus could see. The entity before him was not the other's true form, but merely a fraction of the power it divided from itself. Such a division of power would inevitably leave its master weakened for a while, but conversely, even if he destroyed it, it would not affect the main entity at all. Hiss, brother, principal god. And here I thought you would thank me, Zeus. After all, without Poseidon, the sea lacks a nominal master. And if they don't wish to submit to the ocean god, the offspring of the ancient sea god would have to abandon their previously non-aligned stance and opt to join your divine court. Thinking about it, maybe I am actually acting under your instructions. After all, to the divine king, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. The deep laughter, accompanied by the serpent's hiss, resounded across the ocean, and Zeus's face visibly soured. Indeed, realizing that Poseidon might be suppressed and taken away, his first reaction was just like that. But now the other had preemptively spoken out his thoughts. Enough! You, evil god from Tartarus, the remnant of the beginning of creation. Your very existence is a sin. Stepping forward, Zeus discarded his original thoughts. He had wanted to probe for information from the other, but now it seemed this ancient serpent from the abyss was not an entity to be taken lightly. Thus, he fabricated a background on the spot and summoned his thunder. Since there was no need for dialogue, then with the other's existence he would prove his own power. Now, in the name of the king of all gods, monster, I bestow upon you death. Zeus's gaze turned icy, his peripheral vision sweeping over the ocean. His plans had been spoken out loud. But what of it? Without Poseidon here, the promise he made to him was meaningless. Chapter 898. Three-Headed Dog and Contract _2. As for the remaining ones, whether it's Nereus or Oceanus, or perhaps the primordial water thesis, watch my strength. Then, give me your final choice. Gliding underground, his wings fluttering behind him. Ever since leaving the sea surface, the young deity has been descending continuously, not daring to look back. Hypnos did not know whether the divine king had noticed him, but he was certainly not the most important target. So in this gap, he should still have plenty of time to return. Whoosh! The dim trench had no visible bottom, but as Hypnos flew, at some point, the surrounding sea water suddenly disappeared. If one were to look back at this moment, anyone could only see an upward passage, not separated sea water. This eerie space-time phenomenon exists in every passageway that connects to the portals of the underworld, and their endpoints are often the same. It's much faster than I expected. Hypnos nodded to himself without stopping his stride. These special spatial phenomena often lead to inconsistent travel times to the underworld through the same entrance. However, this time his luck was clearly good. So he continued downward until the ground beneath his feet gradually turned gray. Within the surrounding space, laws different from the mortal realm began to emerge. Not far away stood the great gates of the underworld, and even Hypnos could faintly hear the sound of the Acheron River's waters. However, at this moment the god of sleep stopped in his tracks, because at the end of his gaze, outside the black gates sprawled across the gray earth, the giant beast that had been previously put to sleep by his flute music had somehow awakened. 6 crimson eyes looked this way, with a bloodthirsty and greedy gaze flickering with flames. Cerberus, the three-headed demon dog, offspring of the king of all monsters, Typhon, and also the underworld's gatekeeper. After the turmoil of Typhon, it was subdued by a deity of the underworld and then came here to serve. Its 3 heads took turns resting, guarding the day, night, as well as dawn and dusk. Under its guardianship, no one can pass through the portals of the underworld at will. The reason the god of sleep was able to pass through here from hell to the mortal realm earlier was solely due to his unique divine authority. A beautiful melody of his flute had put this great demon, a match for ordinary deities, into a deep sleep, and then Hypnos left the underworld in peace. Only, he did not know why Cerberus was now awake. Hypnos questioned himself. Although the underworld's power also reduced the strength of deities to some extent, it certainly wasn't as strong as in the mortal realm. Here, the effects of his divine power should not be so short-lived. Even if 3 days and nights passed, the three-headed dog should not have awakened. There's no need for such surprise. It indeed should not have woken up. But its sleep disturbed me, so I woke it. The calm voice came from behind the three-headed dog. A figure slowly emerged from behind the high, mountainous demon. It was a black-clad goddess, devoid of lustrous adornments, even her face seemingly so ordinary among all gods. But with just one glance, Hypnos felt as if facing a formidable enemy. Looking out into the world, without touching the domain of great divine power, there might be deities capable of defeating him head-on, but those who could approach this close without being detected by him were almost non-existent. In the underworld, only Hades, when exercising his authority of the underworld itself, had the potential to do so. Once away from here, he could not manage that either. As for the queen of the underworld, Persephone, her own strength was still a bit too weak. However, at this moment, Hypnos also felt the authority of the underworld emanating from the goddess before him. Excluding that familiar nether moon angel, the identity of the newcomer was then self-evident. Lord of Oath, source of hatred, underworld river Styx. Never did he expect to encounter her here, nor did Hypnos expect that it would not be the ruler of the underworld who had subdued the three-headed dog, but rather this almost imperceptible nether river goddess. Or perhaps it truly was Hades' subordinate. But could these two great deities of the underworld have already taken a stand together? But if so, why would she block his path, and on him what exactly did she want? This being, from the abyss, or as you say, from hell. Today waiting here for you is actually to ask you something. Stroking the fur of the three-headed dog, the great demon obediently lowers its head. With a calm expression, Styx slightly raises her hand, then takes out something from the void that leaves the god of sleep speechless. It's this. I want to know. How did this thing come about? With a serious gaze, the goddess looks into the eyes of the god of sleep. Yet Hypnos truly does not know what to say. It's just a piece of paper. But when it appears in the hands of the goddess of vows, the meaning is quite different. It is this piece of paper. Heaving a long sigh and looking at the paper, Hypnos certainly knows its origin. It comes from the fifth layer of hell, from the giant tree at the very center of the central courtyard. Rooted in the midpoint of hell, its roots extend to 3 realms. And swearing a solemn oath against its trunk allows anyone to exchange a price for eternal strength. In addition, its leaves possess similar powers. Turn them into special paper, and they could force the signatories to honor their promises. Thus, the devils of hell call it devil contract, and this is also why the master of the central courtyard is considered by the devils to be superior to other lords of hell. Not just because of strength, for strength only brings fear. It's because more and more devils, trying to create achievements in the mortal realm, realized its importance and its role as the only thing that can bind the cunning devils, that they revere the great serpent lurking in the courtyard, not just fearing its strength. This is no secret, but something that many devils are aware of. So now, when it appears in the hands of another Lord of Oath, Hypnos can only be silent. Just to recount the truth? Perhaps it's not that simple. As expected, Underworld River Styx must have followed a similar authority to find a user of the devil contract and grasped its ins and outs. Therefore, her blocking him now is certainly not just to hear him recite it once more. His eyes flicker. Blocked in front, pursued from behind, Hypnos doesn't know when the Divine King will return, nor if Styx is alone. He seems to have entered a dead end, inevitably falling into one party's pocket. But the more this is the case, the calmer the heart of the born evil god becomes. Indeed, just like this, what's wrong with staking one's life as a bet? I'm sorry, lady, but I do not wish to answer your question. Is it that you do not know, or do not wish to say? Of course, it's both do not know and do not wish to say. A smile hangs on the corner of his mouth. The words of Hypnos are clearly not the answers to her questions, but what she truly desires, as does Styx. As the god of sleep resolutely refuses, the three-headed dog that was quiet by the side of the nether river goddess suddenly raises its head, and 3 gaping maws open one by one. In direct combat, the god of sleep is certainly no match for the nether river goddess, especially here in her home territory, and he cannot afford to delay for too long. But at this moment, Hypnos is fearless. The underworld may be her home court, but he still has one move left. It's just a gamble, win, and it's a joyous occasion for all. And if he loses the bet, what can happen? Whoosh! Not long ago, just when Poseidon had fallen into a deep sleep. Bearing the flags of Pylos, under the leadership of Prince Antilochos, a fleet clearly scarred by battle, continues to press forward across the sea. Chapter 899 Warner. Days ago, the prince made the decision to retreat. Taking advantage of the moment before the others could react, Antilochos led his men out of the battlefield. There's not much to say about the retreat process. After all, the fleet of the Sea Kingdom still held a considerable advantage. So, after paying some price, the fleet of the Kingdom of Pylos successfully headed in the previously decided direction. Heading south, Antilochos was actually a bit nervous. After all, according to the records of the kingdom, the source of their bloodline, the palace of Sea Emperor Poseidon, was established in the south of the world. The prince once regretted this because if they really came face to face with that fiercely brutal sea god, their fate would probably not be very good. But now, he could only pray that his premonition was not wrong. According to the directions recorded on the sea chart, it seems we are already approaching the deserted archipelago in the southeast of the world. Legend has it that the natural environment here is very superior, even much better than most places in Pylos. It's just because of the special sights here that even the heretics of Silver Moon City do not wish to come near, let alone us believers of the sea god. By the light of the moon, Antilochos spread the map in front of him to observe the positions of the star cluster to ascertain their location. To the west of the remnants of Mount Othries, in today's mortal realm, it is still a wilderness to humans. In the areas where humans live and multiply, the closer to the southeast, the more superior the climate and environment. However, in such circumstances, the countless islands in the southeastern sea of the world have always been neglected, because there, events occur that even all gods cannot comprehend. Mortals who migrated there just the day before would disappear the next day without a trace. Even the gods themselves could not find any clue upon investigating. Passing this area, heading to the southern sea, then making a loop back, muttering to himself, the prince once again confirmed his itinerary, nodding slightly before preparing to go back to rest. The sky was already late. The moon shone over the maritime boundary. Antilochos turned around, preparing to call the guard standing watch in the distance to take up the sea chart. However, at this moment, the prince's expression suddenly changed. Instantly, his normally rosy cheeks turned pale. Weakened, Antilochos half knelt on the deck. Not understanding why, a huge sense of dread surged in his heart. In this instant, the prince felt as if his bloodline was boiling, his soul mourning. And before the guards standing watch during the night could react, the next moment, an immense authority struck from afar. The sound of thunder, clouds covering the skies. At the edge of the night sky, the sea seemed to merge with the heavens, and a massive column of lightning split them apart. The world seemed to be heading towards the end, and this small fleet was the only thing left in the world. What is this? My divine blood! Ah! The pale complexion turned blood red in an instant, as if the veins were about to burst. Antilochos, using his last bit of strength, struggled to crawl to the edge of the deck. Gazing into the distance, the scene resembling the end of the world surged in the prince's intuition. His bloodline source, the Lord of the Sea endorsed by the Olympian pantheon, who shook the earth Sea Emperor, has left this world. From this moment, all those who inherited his divine blood among the demigods, their progeny's divine blood would also start to thin at 1,000-fold speed, with only a few exceptions who could revert their ancestral traits. In this era, for a kingdom, such an occurrence is an outright disastrous outcome. This presaged that the once mighty Sea Kingdom of Pylos might thus be reduced to the dust of history. Although in the past, Antilochos had publicly expressed more than once that humans should not rely solely on the power of divine blood. But the change he envisioned was certainly not to completely abandon everything and face such a cataclysmic change unprepared. However, he couldn't change anything because the fact had already occurred. Chapter 900 Warner underscore 2. For a moment, the prince couldn't help but lose his voice. Leaning on the ship's rail, Antilocos stared blankly at the distant horizon. Was this the premonition he had before? Destiny brought him here to witness the reasons for his kingdom's downfall, to mock his martial prowess? Yet, no matter how unwilling or desperate he felt, faced with a calamity that even the immortal deities could not escape, what could he do? Humans, are you a descendant of Poseidon? Who? His heart sank to the depths, and Antilocos felt himself no different from this fleet, both just insignificant adornments in the boundless ocean. However, at this moment, an inexplicable voice suddenly entered the prince's mind. Reacting instinctively with a low shout, Antilocos immediately realized that no one was speaking to him. All of this was a message delivered directly to his mind. It seems to be so, your bloodline's power is not strong, but among the nearby humans, I could not find a better target. The voice rang out again and, this time, without waiting for the prince to respond, the seawater next to the ship started to roll and separate. The next moment, a special current leaped from it and circled Antilocos several times. It seemed to confirm something, and after completing its task, finally stopped in front of the prince. The water rippled and receded inch by inch. In a short while, all that remained on deck was the metallic luster. Watching the scene unfold before him, Antilocos' eyes widened in disbelief. This thing, only existing in legends and statues, had actually appeared before him in reality. Are you the trident of the Sea Emperor? Impossible, even in the legends about the Olympian gods. Only goddess Athena with her supreme divine authority endowed the symbol of victory, the divine artifact spear of Voctor, with wisdom. Since then, this powerful divine artifact has even once responded to her believers in place of the goddess, and people also called her Victory Goddess Nike. Aside from that, even the Divine King's divine artifact Dien has never possessed its own thought. The prince's loud questioning was actually a vent for his emotional roller coaster. The source of his bloodline had suddenly vanished. Wars with the potential to end the world erupted at the edge of the ocean. And he, a prince as ordinary as any other, suddenly had the trident descend from the heavens upon him. Antilocos was having a hard time accepting this. However, the divine artifact exuding an immense and formidable presence in front of him did not give him time to calm his emotions. With a flash of divine light, the prince's feeble struggle was in vain, and he was immediately enveloped by the trident's power. Behind him, the night watchmen who were on the deck had already fainted under the pressure from the sky. Descendant of Poseidon, what you said is correct. I shouldn't have possessed wisdom, and even he and I thought so. He always treated me as an object, and indeed I never had thought, not even when he tried to wash over me with the faith of marine creatures. I only gained a little bit of spirituality. Until the moment before today, when he cast me out with his last bit of strength, and branded me with the secret he discovered at the last moment, I remained just an object. But at the instant he disappeared from the present world, it was as though I had broken free of some shackles. I started to understand what I meant. Therefore, I didn't follow the trajectory of his force to the place where his believers were the most numerous. Instead, I came to your side. The message coming from the trident seemed puzzled itself, full of confusion. Nevertheless, it tried its best to explain its intentions, not showing the slightest disdain for the mortal in front of it due to the difference in power. I can't go there, maybe because I've acquired wisdom. I suddenly seem to have understood a lot of things. The ocean has lost its original master. Inevitably, a new master must emerge. Whoever it is, they would surely want to obtain me, the weapon of the former Lord of the Sea, and the divine power and authority I represent. So I must hide, but after all, I am just a weapon. I don't know what the spear of Voctor you mentioned is like, but at least I do not wish to try to become a god. Wrapped in the power of the trident, Antilocos was so shocked that he found himself speechless. Chapter 901, Warner underscore 3. Such fantastical events. Could they really happen to him? A little later, The prince calmed his emotions. He stopped struggling and asked respectfully, "I understand. Then how should I address you, your respected highness, and will I have a chance to return to the kingdom of Pylus? Furthermore, may I know what I could possibly do for you that prompted you to seek me out? To address me, I do not know what I should be called. Anything casual will do, or you may regard me as Poseidon. As for returning to your kingdom, it was indeed the place where his last bit of strength had intended to send me. But he must have been on the brink of desperation at that time, and thus he didn't notice. At that time, his uncontrollable and agitated authority had already been unleashed, and the first to be affected were his kingdom of followers. Now, Pylus has probably been destroyed by storms, earthquakes, and floods. Even if there are survivors, there would be very few left." The prince's expression changed once again, but the trident evidently did not understand his emotions. It simply spun in the air, before revealing its true purpose. "As for what I want you to do, it is to find a place of safety, a place hidden from other deities. You will reproduce there in peace, bit by bit, to re-establish a human kingdom. In the end, when all is said and done, your kingdom will pray to me. My wisdom is born not solely from faith, but I still need it. Moreover, I do not wish to stay out here solely to avoid the search of other sea gods and divine kings." Digesting the bombshell of information, Antilochos had no time to grieve over his fallen kingdom, as he was thunderstruck by the subsequent revelation. So starting from now, he, a prince destined to inherit the kingdom, must embark on the path of a nation builder, carrying the weapon of his primordial ancestor, to survive under the prosecution of divine king and all gods? "Your Highness, you might be overestimating me." With a bitter smile, the prince said respectfully, "With my abilities, I can hardly find a safe place to establish my own kingdom, while simultaneously avoiding the pursuit of all gods. Even if Perseus of Perseus constellation were alive, I fear it would be impossible for him too. It's an impossible task." "I see. But no matter, I did not really expect you to be able to find a place. In fact, the descendant of Poseidon, do you remember the secret I mentioned earlier? One he discovered and engraved upon me at the last moment?" The trident swayed in the air, its point of view steadfast. And with it, the prince felt the force exerted upon himself grow even heavier. "Your meaning is, the secret he discovered is the location that meets all the aforementioned requirements. Even if he were a natural-born sea god, the destined monarch to command the seas, he only found this secret hidden in the ocean in his most desperate, life-or-death moment. Apart from him, not even the sovereign of the gods would be able to find that place. However, I have not been there, so this time I will take you with me. After all, I am merely a weapon, whereas you are a true being of life." Hearing this, Antilochos finally understood what the persistent force wrapped around him was for. This wasn't the divine artifact being cautious of him. In fact, he didn't even qualify to warrant such caution. The trident of the Sea Emperor was simply preparing to take him somewhere, and as his own speed was far too slow, it was ready to give him a lift. "Your Highness, All right, let's hurry. The battle over there is about to end. If that divine king finds me, then you will be in danger. Poseidon always detested him, so it's impossible for me to serve him. Right now, that place is the only safe haven." Without wanting to say more, divine light gathered. Enveloping Antilochos, the trident began to sense for the mark left on it by Poseidon. Regarding the secret, even Poseidon had only caught a glimpse of it in the moment of his epic struggle with that mysterious and mighty being, by relying on his own authority and destiny. Beyond that, he had no other information. If there must be some understanding of that place, then it might just be a name. After all, for many powerful and ancient things in this world, they possess the ability of seeing is knowing. Even the trident of the Sea Emperor itself could let a life that saw it for the first time know its name directly. Vanaheim, the home of the Vanir. How strange! Since when has there ever been a Vanir deity race in this world? A little puzzled, But the trident did not ponder further. After all, it was just a weapon. What's so strange about a weapon not knowing something? Chapter 902 Night. Divine power surged, and the force that Poseidon last exerted on the trident gradually depleted. The intense divine light flickered and shimmered until, at a certain moment, the divine artifact, carrying Antilochos, pierced through a void and then vanished above the ocean. At the horizon's end, the divine king noticed this fleeting fluctuation of divine power, but he did not plan to search for the whereabouts of this artifact just yet. Zeus believed that whoever possessed the trident of the Sea Emperor, as long as they dared to use it openly once, he would have a proper reason to seize it into his hands. After all, he and Poseidon were brothers, and among the offspring of the Sea Emperor, there was no deity capable of inheriting his position. As for the Sea Empress Amphitrite, Zeus was well aware of what sort of person she was. If his own queen of gods were such a person, he would probably have acted to remove her long ago. Only Poseidon could still tolerate her. In such a situation, the king of the gods considered himself having a proper reason to seize the artifact without actively seeking it. At present, Zeus was more interested in seizing a living being rather than a lifeless object. No one could openly challenge the divine court and remain unscathed. Someone must pay the price. And that being who had hastily fled before his arrival was just the right target. Having made the decision, in the next moment, an invisible will cross the earth and reach the heart of Mount of the Gods. On Mount Olympus, hidden within a temporal rift inside Asgard, Zeus's will encompass the power of the domain and transformed into another him. Merely with a force split off, you wish to trap me here. This is the present world, my domain, not a place like Tartarus. A low, cold laugh echoed, as if someone else could create such a split force incarnation. Then he, as the divine king, certainly could as well. It had the power of the domain as a medium, but he also had Asgard. Located in the present world, even without invoking this interface's power, Zeus still possessed a more substantial force than when he was in the abyss. Though this incarnation's power was far from equal to his true form, it was already enough to deal with that hurriedly escaping being who was still within the domain of a true god. Rip. With a step, he tore through the space from Asgard to the present world, attaining the closest underworld passage to Mount Olympus. He strode in and flew downwards. Although he had not encountered that fleeting god, Zeus was certain that he had come here. Even though he started a bit late, there was still a good chance to intercept him. Underworld, in front of the giant gates. Pale purple moonlight shined on the gray land, with mint grass growing densely on both banks of Acheron. The howling of souls after death occasionally arose but could only continuously move forward along the river of Oblivion's channel. Outside the gate, first a strong surge swept through, followed by a leisurely arriving bolt of lightning. Dressed extravagantly, carrying himself with dignity. The next moment, the divine king revealed his true form, stepping onto the great gate of the underworld. Perhaps it was bad luck, but Zeus took noticeably longer this time to travel through the underground tunnel. However, this was unavoidable. The temporal and spatial marvels at the gates of the underworld were just so unpredictable. And as an incarnation, the king of the gods did not change its capabilities. As for the rift tearing through time and space, one could come directly from the mortal realm to the underworld. Without the authority over the domain of time-space, only Zeus himself would have enough strength to accomplish this. Walking in front of the great gates of the underworld, the divine king sensed the aura around him. No doubt, the deity that emerged from the abyss had been here, and he had once unleashed his power here. Did he encounter some enemy? The truth remains unknown. Slightly lifting his head, Zeus glanced at the distant, towering portals. The three-headed demon dog was guarding the place, and beyond that, there were no other traces. Son of Typhon, Cerberus, as you see, I am the sovereign of Olympus, the king of all gods. Leaping into the air, the divine king spoke indifferently. He couldn't find traces of that deity, but since there was a witness here, it made sense to ask him. Not long ago, one of the 12 esteemed principal gods of Olympus, a son of Cronus, blood-tied as my brother, who commanded the vast waves of the sea Emperor Poseidon, was murdered in his own domain. That despicable murderer has fled here, intending to elude my pursuit. Cerberus, gatekeeper of the underworld, tell me, what have you seen here? As a guardian of the underworld, have you seen anyone pass here on their way to Hades' kingdom? No, respected your majesty. As the gatekeeper of the underworld, no one can pass this place before me. However, regarding the murderer you mentioned, I indeed saw a silhouette. Where did he go? Zeus asked with a frown. No one could pass. He never believed in absolutes, especially since Cerberus' strength clearly did not match that of the deity. However, one thing the Divine King could be sure of was that the other party would definitely not return to the mortal realm right under his watch. Thus, the other party is either still within the underworld or still outside this portal. And during this period, he certainly has not returned to the abyss. He went there, your majesty. I did not dare approach, but he truly went in. Lowering his heads, contrary to what mortals believe, the three-headed demon dog showed extraordinary obedience. His two heads did not interrupt, only the middle one spoke. If it were any other day, Zeus might have been pleased since Typhon's offspring were finally devoid of their unruly nature, not at all insightful like their father. But at this moment, looking at the location Cerberus indicated, the Divine King remained silent. So it was here he should have guessed earlier. That deity unleashed his power here, which shows that he encountered trouble here. Whether it was seeing the three-headed dog and unintentionally revealing his strength, or for some other reason, this shows that he should not be able to return directly to the abyss. So the question arises, in the vicinity of the underworld gates, what other place could hide a being of great divine power, even making it utterly undetectable to him? Land of eternal night. Haha. Respected Mother Night, that swift darkness. Could it be that this time, even you are going to stand against me? Muttering to himself, the Divine King slightly raised his hand. An invisible force arose, reaching toward that tranquil expanse of night. At the very beginning, the underworld was born at a place interwoven by the powers of four primordial gods. Abyss lies below it, the earth above, while darkness and eternal night surround it like tides, bringing night and day to the mortal realm. Thus, whenever one approaches the gates of the underworld, they can see the domains of the two primordial deities on either side, opposing yet the same. However, no one really cares about them, as the world has already accustomed itself to their silence. It was not until recently when the Lord of Darkness ascended the Mount of the Gods that the gods suddenly became aware of their existence. And now, that being from the abyss has also ventured into the land of eternal night. Snap! A clear sound. An invisible force touched and then repelled. The Divine King was rejected at the door, much like many deities before him. In previous days, they all visited the Mother Night, but including those underworld deities, none succeeded. The Lord of Eternal Night indifferently overlooked each of them, as if they were mere mortals rather than deities. Sigh! With a gentle exhale, the being he was searching for might be inside, and the secrets deep within the abyss might also be revealed before him. Yet standing at the interwoven area of the land of eternal night and the underworld, Zeus hesitated to enter. Although the recent refusal was just an attitude, even an instinctual reaction of the land of eternal night, the Divine King did not feel the truly supreme power of the primordial god. But at this moment he still hesitated. Without Nyx's will, the spontaneously generated power of this realm couldn't stop him. But Zeus was unclear what would happen once he made his choice. Perhaps nothing would occur because the Mother Night truly did not care about the deity who intruded, simply ignoring him, or maybe that deity had already paid the price for his recklessness. Or perhaps his actions would provoke her wrath, causing this ancient god, unseen for 3 epochs, to step out of her realm for the first time and make the trespasser pay. After much hesitation, his presence fluctuated. But in the end, Zeus did nothing. Capturing that deity from the abyss was important, but Nyx's existence was even more crucial. The Divine King knew the strength of Erebus, and the Mother Night was likely not weaker than him. Forget it. If that criminal is fated with the esteemed Mother Night, then if he walks out here carrying a token from Princess Nyx, I shall pardon his wrongdoing. But if it's unrelated, then as the sovereign of the gods, I won't overlook this pretender who disturbed the goddess's peace. So, Cerberus. Speaking plainly, Zeus didn't know if Nyx was inside or if she heard him speak, but his message was clear, and so the divine king summoned the gatekeeper demon by his side. Power surged, and the embodied force began to gather. Looking at the approaching three-headed demon dog, the divine king faintly smiled. Thinking he could avoid confrontation by hiding in the land of eternal night? Of course not. Though he had several guesses, Zeus was actually more inclined towards the latter. That deity from the abyss probably went unnoticed by the Mother Night. Otherwise, the three-headed dog would not remember its trace. For the primordial goddess who commands secrecy, she has too many ways to conceal its tracks. Come, Cerberus, step forward and take my power. I think you have already heard what I just said, and this is what I want you to do. As the sovereign of the gods, I can't stay here forever, and the task I give you is to guard this exit. If someone emerges without carrying a token from the Mother Night, or other proof of their identity, then restraining them is the only thing you need to do. What if they carry it? Asked the three-headed dog. If they do, then remember to tell them that compared to the darkness and chaos of the abyss, the mortal realm is much better. There are delicious foods, fine nectar, and beautiful people. There are millions who regard deities as supreme, countless faiths serving as fuel. Tartarus is not the destiny of deities. Mount Olympus is. That is the sacred place of all gods, an eternal sanctuary. If he is willing to turn from darkness to light, even out of respect for the esteemed Lord of Eternal Night, I am willing to give him a transcendent welcome. Anything can be negotiated if he so desires. Concentrating his own power, Zeus spoke calmly. He looked at the land of eternal night before him, his lips curling into a slight smile. You may have entered this forbidden land, but can you never leave? If so, he would concede. That would mean perhaps the other party truly has a deep connection with the primordial deities, and at that time he would choose to step back and no longer contend, but henceforth he would likely have to consider Mother Night as a potential adversary. Having ignored her presence in the past is past, and like Erebus, perhaps Nyx has her own plans. Of course, the best resolution would be to win her over to his side, although up until now, Zeus still doesn't know what this ancient deity is interested in or likes. All right, that's it then. Do your duty, Cerberus. As long as you handle this well, I, as the divine king, will surely provide you with a matching reward. Having given his last instruction, Zeus didn't stay any longer but turned around and left directly. Today's affairs were somewhat abundant. He still needed to carefully sort through them. Like what exactly is the purpose of the abyss? Everything happened so suddenly, he currently has no clue. Did Poseidon do something, or did he discover something, or was it purely targeted at him towards Olympus? Both are possible, or perhaps none of the above. However, besides that, there's one matter Zeus urgently needs to resolve. And that is, now that Poseidon is taken away from the mortal realm, who should inherit his position as the principal god? Nereus? Perhaps it's worth considering. Actually, Oceanus would be a better choice, but due to vows, it isn't easy for me to directly act against him, and this old fellow is unwilling to bow. Métis, your daughter doesn't make things easy for me, and your father also stands in my way. If you were still alive, if I hadn't acted against you, would you still stand by my side? Hee. No answer, only laughter echoed through the air. Although no one could answer the divine king's question, thinking of his mother goddess, Zeus felt that perhaps this was indeed the best outcome. Chapter 903, Magnetic Stone. Sigh. Is it finally gone? The border where the underworld meets the land of eternal night was bathed in the pale purple moonlight, illuminating the gray earth. And just a step away in the curtain of night, the young deity quietly observed everything happening outside. As one of the primordial gods, Nyx, she is the goddess of the night and the master of concealment. Under her protective power, no one from the outside could penetrate the secrets within her realm, not even Zeus. Hence, from start to finish, the Divine King never knew that the existence he was searching for was merely an arm's length away. With just a reach of his hand, the Divine King could have captured him. But until the very last moment, he did not take that step. As expected, as long as I come here, Zeus would no longer pursue into this place. After all, compared to me, he is less willing to make enemies over a trivial matter with the ancient gods who coexist with the world. He already has enough enemies, and he probably couldn't even guess why I could enter this place. If it's just because my strength is too weak, then his intrusion would mean unnecessarily inviting huge trouble for himself. Muttering to himself at this very moment, the young deity's expression resembled a pitiful child chased to his doorstep by societal figures. Finally escaping back home, he wore a look of post-disaster relief. Watching the departing activists through the window, he feels grateful for the parents who brought him safety. Sigh. After all, it's all thanks to the supreme divine might of the Mother Goddess. Even the current Divine King dares not provoke her. Even if Zeus is usually arrogant and domineering, he wouldn't dare to cause trouble here. Humph, it's only because the Mother Goddess wishes not to involve herself in these matters. Otherwise, the master of all spirits in the present world would not be his place to assume. Under the eternal night, whether it's the stars, the earth, or the ocean, all should look up to the Mother Goddess first and foremost. His tone was sincere, and his demeanor utterly natural. To anyone observing, it would only appear as a genuine outpouring of emotions from Hypnos. However, he stayed on the edge of the land of eternal night for quite a while, until the three-headed demon dog returned to its original spot. Its two dog heads steadfastly watched the edge of the land of eternal night, as if to fulfill the task entrusted by the Divine King. Yet nothing happened near the god of sleep. The land of eternal night remains ever so quiet, because the Mother Night is also the sovereign of silence. At the very dawn of creation, all clamor dissipates without a trace under the night sky. Well, perhaps Zeus's guess was right. The Mother Goddess probably really doesn't consider me important. I can come here simply because I was born here. Besides that, I have nothing special. After a while, realizing that there really won't be any further changes, Hypnos felt a bit disappointed yet relieved. For him, no change was quite good. After all, his only impression of the goddess of the night was seeing her once at birth, and she seemed not to care much about him. Besides that, Hypnos had no further communication with Nyx. He couldn't fathom her current attitude and didn't know what she thought, so seeing her might as well be avoided. The only downside was that this probably meant he was temporarily stuck here. Unlike before, in the land of eternal night, Hypnos's power could not penetrate the barrier of eternal night and lull Cerberus to sleep beyond its perception. And once he would leave this place, what awaited the god of sleep would likely be the thunderous measures left by the Divine King. Hypnos didn't possess any tokens from Nyx. So right now, Hypnos could either wait here, hoping the monarch of hell would remember him and thereby find a way to save him, or he could just continue staying here, waiting for some uncertain chance to arise. Anyway, better to leave this place first. The land of eternal night is not safe. His expression still appeared fond and hopeful, though it had been a long time since he came back. Hypnos still remembered that in this territory of ancient gods, there were many quasi-divine beings. Although they could not threaten the current god of sleep, be it in terms of strength or other aspects, engaging in a major fight in the land of eternal night itself is a foolish act. So, after one last look at the direction he came from, Hypnos continued walking further inside along the path he remembered. He didn't truly understand this place, nor did he know where to avoid the native creatures. But there was one place that should be relatively safe. That was where he was born, the plains covered with somnus blossoms. There, the remnants of the Mother Night's power lingered, causing all life forms to instinctively keep away. Only Hypnos himself, being born there, considered it another homeland. Around the time when Hypnos was forced into land of eternal night, nearly at the same moment. In a strange space-time that overlaps and branches off in the southeast of the world but distinctly separated from the present world. Ever since it fell from beyond the heavens thousands of years ago, it has been wrapped and assimilated by the world's force. Laws actively and powerfully functioned on its surface, isolating it from the approach of any creatures. And without the right moment, even if one knows it's here, no one could enter inside. Chapter 904 Magnetic Stone _2. Erebus was like this, and naturally so were the other existences in this world. But just today it seems that something has changed. Perhaps it was the disturbance of a once familiar aura, or maybe it was the outburst of the sea god as he faced a desperate situation, or perhaps it was some other reason. In any event, on this day, a tiny crack finally appeared in the tight temporal and spatial barrier at the periphery of this realm. It might still be insufficient for the true deities to pass through, but for some other mortal beings, this place had changed and was no longer an inaccessible forbidden zone. RIP. At one moment, in the center of the ruins that have been silent for 10,000 years, the world finally welcomed its first change. The void trembled slightly, and then it was torn open with a rift by someone. It started as a small gap, then grew larger and more obvious. Until at one point, it turned into an elliptical hole 2 people tall, emitting a faint blue twilight. Time and space, rippling like water, filled the inside, and soon, followed by a burst of intense light, it seemed as if something had traveled through it. The hole disappeared immediately, and the phenomenon returned to nothingness. What remained in place was only the young prince, and the divine artifact which had clearly dimmed by more than a fraction. Plop! Thump! Ah! Oof! Ah! Ha! Kneeling on the ground, the prince was panting heavily. As if drenched in water, Antilokos was soaked in sweat. With a pale and bloodless complexion, the prince seemed as if he had suffered a heavy blow. Of course, in reality, that was indeed the case. The trident of the Sea Emperor hadn't deceived him. The coordinates it obtained from Poseidon were indeed accurate. By leveraging these space-time coordinates, they accomplished what the vast majority of deities couldn't, traveling between realms of space. And from the results, they had indeed successfully arrived here. Even though he still didn't know where this place exactly was, Antilokos could be certain that this was definitely not the familiar sea he knew. It was not just the environmental issues, but more so because as a warrior who had barely stepped into the legendary domain by relying on the strength of divine blood, he could roughly sense the laws so distinct from the material realm. Here, all things seemed lifeless, devoid of any hint of vitality or vigor. However, before all that, the prince needed to recover some of his strength. Because arrival counted for little if both he and the trident ignored a significant issue. That is, the act of crossing through time and space was truly not something just anyone could do. Poseidon left no warnings when he discovered this place because he was a god, and he didn't see any issue with it. The trident of the Sea Emperor had no objections, as it was a divine artifact, naturally unconcerned by the pressure of time and space. As for Antilokos, he wouldn't have prepared in advance for something he had never done before. So, when he truly began this interrealm journey, the prince almost didn't make it here alive. Poseidon's descendant, this was my oversight, are you all right? Divine light flickered, and a wave of thoughts emerged from the trident of the Sea Emperor. It wasn't intentional. It simply hadn't anticipated such a turn of events. After all, in its view, this was never a problem worth worrying about. Huff. Heh. It's okay. I'm still here. Regardless, we made it inside, didn't we? So this place, is it capable of evading the sea god, or even of hiding from the divine king's search? Taking several deep breaths, the injuries on his body gradually subsided, soothed by the rolling divine blood coursing through him. The prince stood up from the ground, surveying his surroundings. This was a city, or at least it used to be. It had been destroyed, leaving only fragments behind. Even so, as Antilokos beheld the ruins, a flicker of amazement still flashed in his eyes. The uniformly structured building materials, the colorful decorations, and the various architectural styles. Although indescribable, the prince could still perceive a sense of exotic beauty from them. But what truly captured his attention was the fragmented crystal lattices and the patterns on the surfaces of the debris. At a glance, Antilocos felt a sense of familiarity. Silver Moon City? No. Their style is vastly different from that of Silver Moon City. These are surely not the products of the same type, but rather they operate independently, yet the end result seems to converge on a similar path. My lord, these things were not made casually. They must have their own knowledge, their own system, countless scholars and powerful entities behind them. This is exactly the direction I want to take. But even such a civilization could not escape annihilation. Could it? With his emotions stirred, the prince unconsciously took a few steps forward, caressing the several layers of patterns on a fallen column. At first glance, they seemed like mere decorative patterns. But to Antilocos, who had seen alchemy runes with his own eyes, could still distinguish the significant differences between the two. Runes or patterns, they are both imitations at the time of their creation, simplifying certain aspects of the law, ultimately applied to one's creations. And undoubtedly, the patterns before Antilocos now possessed extraordinary strength. Even with adequate energy supply, they might still operate now. Time clearly had not eroded their existence. Such exquisite skill. Yet even such things are only used for construction. The extravagance and grandeur here are truly astounding. No, this might not be valuable to them. Shaking his head lightly, the prince tried to shift his mindset. This is not a problem because it was probably the same for Silver Moon City. For them, alchemical products may have already integrated into every corner of life. They might use alchemy and rune artifacts just as humans use iron pots and kitchen utensils, already becoming a part of life. Without further thought, his fingers traced to the apex of the debris, where Antilocos discovered a special stone. It was located at a node where many patterns converged, and it seemed to be absorbing some kind of energy from the outside world. It seems that this space no longer contained what it needed, so no matter how much it tried to absorb, it was all in vain. 1,000 years, 2,000 years, or has even more time passed? It's unbelievable. Such miraculous artifacts. I wonder if there are still any living people here. If not, then so be it, but if there are, I must ask them about the correct way to power this stone, and what this building was originally used for when it was intact. What I've always wanted is these: knowledge, civilization, and everything that is equivalent to them. His tone filled with admiration. The prince made no attempt to hide his thoughts. And to this, the divine artifact said nothing. It didn't quite understand this behavior and didn't think there was anything remarkable about mortal creations. No matter how mighty mortal objects are, they are useless before divine power. But since he is interested, let him look. After all, humans can offer faith, and thus what they are interested in also has value. Let's continue walking deeper. Just now I tried to sense this place. If this is a city, then where we are should still only be its outermost part. So if there are still living beings here, they are most likely over there. I understand. With a slight nod, Antilocos put down what was in his hand. The energy that should be present was all around him. For the moment, the prince didn't think he could discover any answers. So, just as the divine artifact said, he would walk further inside. After all, if he wanted to survive here in the future, understanding the environment and dangers was also an essential preparation. Chapter 905. The Deceiver. Tap, tap. Following a vaguely recognizable main path, Antilocos proceeded. Small stones, stirred by the prince's movement, rolled in all directions, hitting the fragmented walls. Amidst these ruins, Antilocos saw many creations of the same style as the ones he had seen before. Broken patterns, shattered, chaotic crystal pipes, and various texts and books. A polyhedral stone that continuously absorbed elements from its surroundings, but could never garner any energy. Yet, as he neared the center of this ancient city, more and more doubts surfaced in the prince's heart. Without a doubt, there had once been a great civilization here, far more powerful than Pylos. Even comparing the two would be an insult to the former. Even the Silver Moon City, which worships the ancient gods, while Antilocos did not understand the true strength of the two, In his opinion, the latter might not be more powerful than this kingdom that had long perished. Nevertheless, such a civilization had vanished in such a strange way. Yes, strange, not unreasonable. After all, even the king of all gods would be succeeded, and the stars in the heavens would fall to the mortal realm. How could the kingdoms built by humans truly remain immortal? What the prince truly couldn't comprehend was the odd sense of discord behind this destruction. To perish is understandable, but for it to perish in such a way seemed very unusual. According to the records of the kingdom, never mind. Even the Sea Emperor His Majesty has met with misfortune, so I might as well just say it. With a self-deprecating smile, Antilochos's gaze swept over the traces of damage on the surrounding buildings, as if a natural disaster had buried everything, turning the city into dust and ashes. According to the few texts that have been passed down from Silver Moon City, Mount Olympus was not a natural pillar of heaven, and the current divine king is not the eternal king of all gods. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of years ago, in an era unreachable by mortals. At that time, the true center of the mortal realm had another name. It was Mount Othrys, and at that time, this original mount of the gods stood tall in the world. It supported the heavens and the earth, and at the highest place in the world, the supreme monarch ruled over the entire mortal realm. So, Your Highness, not truly addressing him with Poseidon, the prince used a more general term. What happened on that Mount of the Gods when the divine king was succeeded? And what was the fate of the lives that originally resided there? It collapsed. The halo circulated, and the consciousness of the trident spoke slowly. Although it had only obtained its own wisdom not long ago, the marks left on it when it was merely a divine artifact had not been erased. As a participant in that war, the trident was well aware of the outcome of that struggle. The Mount of the Gods toppled, and all spirits fell silent. The previous divine king allowed all who wished to leave to do so before the final battle, but there were always those who believed they were far enough away, or the speechless beasts and birds. So in the end, they all died there, along with that magnificent pillar of heaven, turning into remnants of the olden days. He nodded slightly. This was no different from what he knew. Mount Othrys fell during the succession of the divine king, collapsing under the might of the previous king. But it was precisely this outcome that made Ambrocus even more puzzled about everything he was witnessing. As a pillar holding up the sky, that ancient mountain perished due to the warfare of the mighty, and countless lives were extinguished. This is our history, but what about this place? Why is it like this? There's no testament to human action here, nor any trace of warfare, not even a single corpse or bloodstain to be found. If this were an eradication by the supreme beings, then how did these so-called remains get left behind? If it's merely a natural disaster, how could such a civilization, adept at wielding transcendental powers, perish so effortlessly? Rather than a sudden catastrophe, I'm more inclined to believe this was an extinction that was foreseen. The people here had long known about the impending disaster and then fled this place. Perhaps time was pressing, but this result was certainly not unforeseen. As for whether they survived, that's something no one can know. As he drew closer to the center of the city, everything in sight became more intricate and sacred. Ambrocus saw arrangements similar to worship in many places. Clearly, the beings that once lived here also believed in deities. They were devout and earnest, letting faith permeate every corner of their lives. But just like Pylos, in the end, the gods they worshipped ultimately couldn't save them. Or perhaps they did save them, but at that moment, the deities were too preoccupied with their own plight. You do have a point. Yet, Poseidon's descendants, this place does not look like it fell into ruin after being abandoned. From the layout of this city, at least at the time its inhabitants left, they must have never imagined they could never return. From this perspective, there can only be one answer to their fate. The blue light vibrated, and the divine artifact responded. It too was immensely concerned about this world, hidden on the other side of the temporal seascape. An entire realm. If Poseidon had discovered it early on, he might have truly had the chance to reign over all the seas with the power of this realm. But fate loves its ironies. When he was free, he never found this opportunity that was right under his nose. And when he finally had the chance, Poseidon no longer had the capacity to attain it. He could only entrust his hopes to others, but the trident didn't think it would do any good. It brought the prince here not because it believed it could fulfill the Sea Emperor's wish, but because it also did not want to fall into other gods' hands, and it too needed the blessing of faith. Yes, they thought they could return, but it turned out they were mistaken. I wonder what kind of disaster destroyed them, and if it could strike again. The prince muttered to himself, unaware of what the trident was thinking. After passing a tall, collapsed column, the view before Ambrocus suddenly widened considerably. Right there, not far ahead, was the city's center. Surrounding him were fallen buildings, and within was an open space. And at the center of the open space was a huge, damaged base, upon which sat an equally enormous stone. At just a glance, the prince realized how familiar that so-called stone was. Though magnified by 1,000-fold, a closer inspection would show there was no difference between it and the stone edges embedded in the ruins throughout the city. What is this thing? Taking a deep breath, Ambrocus subconsciously continued forward, attempting to approach the location. Near that pedestal, he saw a few pieces of equipment that were still intact. They might still be usable, which was a key discovery. However, at that moment, the divine artifact beside the prince suddenly surged with divine light. The azure halo floated around like ribbons, as if guarding the young prince. And at the tip of the trident, an even more frightening light flickered. Buzz, wait! Don't get agitated. I have no malice, nor do I have the ability to harbor any. The rune stone has long been devoid of power, and Vanaheim has not seen sunlight for tens of thousands of years. You are the only visitors, perhaps also the last. We are not enemies. Perhaps you can listen to what I have to say first. The voice rose above the crumbling ruins, and it was only at this point that Ambrocus belatedly realized. His spirit immediately tense. The prince's gaze swept around. Everything was silent, with no apparent changes. However, the next moment he discovered the source of the voice. Magnetic stone. Who are you? What is this place? And where are the people who once lived here now? What is this so-called magnetic stone used for? The prince asked loudly, feeling extremely fortunate to have the protection of the trident on his journey. He couldn't actually understand the language spoken by the other party. He could only understand the intent. Like the so-called rune stone, whose entire meaning is sunstone inscribed with runes, but in the language of Pylos, it can be phonetically rendered as magnetic stone only. Of course, that was still a minor issue. What really made the prince anxious was the voice in these ruins. Is it the original inhabitant? Impossible. Then, is it the culprit responsible for the destruction of this place? If so, then himself. I did not cause the destruction of Vanaheim, human. In fact, I do not possess that ability. When I was created, the great Gulveig had written in me the most fundamental order, and that is, under no circumstance is it permissible to harm any member of the Vanir. The voice betrayed no hint of fluctuation, and under Ambrocus's watch, a faint apparition began to materialize on the dusty ground not far from the pedestal. It was a woman. Her face bore an unnatural smile, wearing clothes of a markedly different style. There was no shadow beneath her on the ground. Obviously, she was not a being of substance. Can you read my thoughts? Even more cautious, Ambrocus moved a bit closer to the direction of the divine artifact. The trident timely emitted a stronger halo, shining around the prince. To all these movements, the manifested woman paid no heed. She maintained the same unchanging smile, answering the questions the prince had asked. No, I cannot read your thoughts. It's just that when the great Gulveig created me, she imparted to me a minor fraction of her wisdom, which enables me to see through the hearts of people. Just like now, you are wary of me, but it's unnecessary. My existence is to serve the Vanir, and humans are worshippers of the deity race, so I will not harm you. And about your earlier doubts, this is a rune stone, a result of the great Gulvig's research into the power of the agriculture god before the sunlight departed. It can endlessly draw strength from the sunlight, transforming it into a nearly inexhaustible source of energy. Whether it's the rune stone or the magnetic stone he had phonetically rendered, at this moment, the prince no longer cared about it. This unknown existence claimed she was not dangerous, but what dangerous thing would admit to its own threat? Then how did the people here die? Don't try to deceive me. And the Vanir, who are they? Gone. Vanaheim has been buried in history, perishing along with time itself. As for whether the great Gulvig still lives, that is not within my knowledge. She is an undying witch, the mightiest deities could not affect her. But in the cataclysm that marks the end of all things, no one can be certain of survival. The voice remained steady, gentle yet cold. The woman's apparition continued to speak, without the slightest pause. As for the demise of the inhabitants here, they were the favored of the deity race or demigods with divine blood in their veins. They were supposed to enjoy joy and beauty in the divine domain. But on that day, the sign of destruction arrived, foreseen by the ruler of the Aesir tribe in Asgard. At that ultimate moment, sworn enemies laid down their hostilities, and adversaries shook hands in reconciliation. God King Odin came here, not wielding his divine lance. Alone he proposed a method to evade disaster. It seems he failed. The prince had little reaction to much of what the woman said, as he had no understanding of the significance behind those names. But when she mentioned the Divine King, he still said a word reflexively. Divine King, is there still a god king by the name of Odin in this world? He did not know, but perhaps the other party had already been engulfed in the disaster. No, he did not fail, for to him, there was never an option of failure. It's just different for us. Calmly speaking, the apparition uttered faintly. After all attempts had failed, he deceived us. Because of his deceit, the Vanir have become history. And God King Odin, perhaps he still lives. Chapter 906. Atlantis. It's not right. In the center of the city ruins, Ambrosius quietly listened to the narrative of the shadowy figure before him. He didn't care about the life or death of the Divine King. In fact, the prince was quite skeptical of the so-called title of Divine King that Odin held. But setting aside the truth for now, Ambrosius had his own doubts about this matter itself. Deceit. You say he deceived you all, leading to the entire clan's destruction. But on such a crucial matter of life and death, why would you trust an outsider? Even the closest of allies would not be without their defenses, let alone, in your words, you were not friends to begin with. I don't know. Because Odin's deceit was beyond everyone's expectations. Even the leader of the Vanir had not foreseen this outcome. For tens of thousands of years, the Odin that everyone knew would never betray his allies on the battlefield. He swore on his divine lance never to retreat, and even Njord had never doubted him. But the result was just like this. Because of his deceit, the entire deity race turned to dust. That was Odin, but perhaps it was no longer just Odin. He knew it himself, or maybe he wasn't yet aware. That day, after learning the news, the great Gulvig told me so. Then she and the last remaining deities of our race left, never to return, and have not come back since. The voice remained unwavering, as the shadowy figure smiled while recounting history. Just listening to the other party, the prince felt a vague chill in his heart. Yes, but not just that. What does that mean? Putting aside the useless thoughts, Ambrosius continued to ask. What about Odin then? If he is still alive, where do you think he would be? I don't know, at least not in Vanaheim. And in some sense, he might not even be in the remnants of the 9 realms anymore. That is good. Subconsciously letting out a sigh of relief, Ambrosius didn't feel any shame in doing so. Although he was unsure how genuine the other party's title of Divine King was, that was probably a real deity. Merely with a divine artifact in hand, the prince had not become that arrogant. Then you, why have you appeared before me? After going around in a big circle, Ambrosius finally asked his last question. It seemed that the other party was an original inhabitant of this realm, so what was her view on him, an outsider? It's nothing special. Serving deities and demigods is the very reason I was created. The Vanir are no more, but you, who carry the bloodline of the sea deity, also have the right to reside here. These were the rules set by the leaders of the deity race, the summer and sea god Njord. Njord, the leader of the Vanir, god of summers and oceans, also the father of Freyr, the god of sunlight and fertility, and Freya, the goddess of beauty. The latter two were once sent to Asgard as hostages for ceasefire, and the wise giant Mimir was the exchange given to Vanaheim by Asgard. Freyr's sword, after several exchanges, eventually embodied the essence of Chaos's sun, and was planted at the foot of Olympus mountain. Therefore, the rune stones of Vanaheim could absorb the sunlight's energy, and even the realm itself fell into the sea and came into contact with Poseidon. So it means, I am entitled to use this place and also have the right to bring others in. And you? Will you provide me as much assistance as possible? The prince didn't know the reasons behind it at this moment, but that didn't stop him from understanding the meaning of the projection before him. He originally came here to find a sanctuary to accommodate them. Certainly. But there are some things here that only gods and demigods can use. You can come with me to take a look. They should be of some help to you. If you wish to rebuild this place, they may even be a great help to you. The projection nodded slightly, tranquilly responding. As long as it aligns with its rules, there was no reason for it to refuse this option. As for the leftovers here, if the deity race was still present, they could easily produce the same items. But since they have long been destroyed, there's no use in keeping them. Rip. In the rolling waves of the sea, the seemingly massive fleet was like grains of sand scattered on the ground. The crew lay unconscious on the deck, their clothes already drenched. Clearly, for these mortals, they were far from recovering from the overwhelming pressure that had just upturned them. Time passed unknowingly, and at a certain moment, a crack opened up in the void. Passing through the azure portal, Ambrosius returned to his flagship once again. Compared to when he left, the waves of the ocean had become even more intense. Now that the real world has lost the deities who govern the storm and earthquakes, their corresponding laws would inevitably become more agitated over time. A god must take up this burden, or find a way to stabilize it. Of course, this is not difficult. But these mattered little to Ambrosius. The prince stepped on the swaying deck and let out a slight breath. He didn't know when, but the phenomena brought by the God King had already disappeared without a trace. Without cause, the strife there might have ended. Waving his hand to close the dimensional gateway behind him, this was a new ability the prince had gained. From this moment on, Ambrosius possessed the right to open the gate of Vanaheim. Although in terms of power, the prince was far from being able to assimilate and control this realm, it didn't stop him from using this insignificant authority. As long as he was near the East Sea, he could return to that world. Through certain methods, he could even change the location's exit and move the entire realm's position. In fact, the prince did indeed have such a plan. The East Sea was still too noisy. If possible, he would relocate to the west side of the continent. Your Highness, have we succeeded? Returning to a familiar place, the prince's mood relaxed somewhat. Although they had always been protected by the divine artifact, Ambrosius was still tense. But after some back and forth, they finally had a place to go. Whether it was feasible or not, the prince was still undecided. Success? I suppose so. In this regard, I have no experience either. Those past memories only increase my insight, but I'm hearing the story told by that spiritual body for the first time. Slightly trembling, the trident of the Sea Emperor did not hide its inadequacy. After all, it really had no understanding of the so-called Vanaheim. God King Odin, the sunlight god, another sea god, deities who can die in battle. These were things it had never heard of, and naturally it was difficult to make a decision. However, since they had no other choice at the moment, in the end, the trident still gave an affirmative answer. Let's go there. Without Poseidon's presence, you simply can't protect me. And without the protection of a god, the divine blood in you will be the source of your misfortune. Hide in Vanaheim with your subjects. You can reproduce there and establish a new kingdom, and you will be the first ruler there, and perhaps one day, you might even have the chance to attain immortality. Slightly swaying, though it was just a weapon, the trident too had its ambitions. It did not want to be used at will anymore. It wanted to be worshipped and placed on a high altar. Obtain immortality? Ambrosius, beside the trident, silently repeated the word and shook his head with a wry smile. That was too distant. He was nowhere near worrying about his lifespan just yet. But the trident was right. Vanaheim was now his only choice. A faint sound came from a distance. The prince looked up to see someone was about to awaken from unconsciousness. Even just to calm people's hearts, he had to do something. All right, Your Highness, I will go and make some preparations. Try to get things done before others remember us. Since Pylos has already been destroyed by earthquakes, storms, and floods, it's up to us alone to carry it forward. In this fleet that followed me, there are 10 aristocrats with divine blood flowing in their veins. They will be the support for my future. I figure as long as they have felt the changes in their bloodline, they won't refuse my request. Speaking his inner thoughts, Ambrosius wasn't very saddened by the fate of Pylos, which was another reason why he readily accepted the trident's words. Most of the people left there could not understand his thoughts. Only these soldiers who had interacted with the Athenians were different. The only thing that made the prince somewhat regretful was his father, yet the latter was already old. Sooner or later, this day was bound to come. I'm not sure if my father can still return to the deity's kingdom in his current state. Even the gods themselves can't take care of themselves, let alone the believers. The trident had no answer to this question. Speaking of which, since I'm prepared to survive in a different place, there's no need to keep the name Pylos. And it's not clear whether there are enemies in Vanaheim. Although the spiritual body said there are none, who can say for certain? You're right. So do you have any ideas? Circling in the air, the trident signaled its approval. The prince only smiled. Such matters were naturally to be decided by others. No, and besides, it should not be me to decide. Only you have the right to name a kingdom and a realm. After a brief silence, the newly conscious divine artifact seemed to be moved. Indeed, this was something even the former Poseidon had not done. Then what name would be worthy of its status? After racking its brains, at one moment, the trident had a sudden inspiration. It recalled that the vengeful Poseidon once spent a time searching for information about the spirit realm, but it came to nothing in the end. However, during this process, he came into contact with the language of the spirit realm. Among those unorganized words, there seemed to be one that was very apt for the current situation. I remember you just mentioned to me that to avoid the all gods and trouble, you're planning to move the entrance of this realm to the west side of the continent, to the place far from Olympus. This idea is excellent. Since this is the case, let's just call this realm West Continent from now on. May you grow strong in the future, allowing its status to rival another continental realm. And the name of your country? After hesitating for a moment, the trident finally gave its answer. The name of your country will be Atlantis. According to the knowledge Poseidon once collected, this word seems to be understood as lost, ideal, or encircled by the ocean. The trident felt this description was very apt. The lost divine artifact and deity, the lost realm, the lost demigods and civilization. This was their portrayal. Of course, this is only now. One day they would face the world anew, and the trident of the Sea Emperor would still be the symbol of the sea's might. Chapter 907. Entering the City. The place in the southeast by the sea, close to Silver Moon City, there lay a flat beach. The sky was clear, the air was fresh, and there was not a cloud in sight. The faint briny scent of seawater was carried ashore by the breeze, as crabs scurried in and out of the sand. The cosmic change that occurred several days ago seemed as if it never happened. Even the shifting of the temporal layers of Vanaheim couldn't affect the survival of these creatures. For these tiny lives, This modest beach was their entire world. The hem of the goddess of dawn's gown brushed the horizon as it settled back over the palaces atop Mount of the Gods. And facing the illumination of the sunrise, a huge shadow was gradually ascending from the seabed. Through the clear water, one could vaguely see its dark shell. Yet upon the indestructible hull, there were many scars varying in depth. Hiss, crack. Emerging to the surface amidst the humming, the grand alchemy ship revealed itself above the sea. A hissing sound of air being compressed came from the sealed hatch, followed by the clash of mechanisms inside. It didn't take long for an oval-shaped hatch to open up on the colossal hull. A pair of strong hands gripped the edge and then leaped out. Thump! Feet landed on the beach as the young hero greedily breathed in the fresh air. It wasn't that the air circulation system inside the ship was faulty, but the natural breeze was indeed more comforting to the heart. Rustle, rustle, as if worlds apart, isn't it? Staying in a confined environment for too long always takes some readjustment, and although these intricate creations are quite remarkable, their skill is still far from comparing to the wonders of creation. Even this simple gas contains many secrets unknown to man. Then, without the dramatic movements of the great hero, the tall and lanky Prometheus stepped onto the beach, wading through the water. The sunlight warmed his skin, and the forethinker felt a touch of warmth. Basking in the gentle sea breeze, Prometheus smiled and spoke. "That's because, sir, your expectations are too high. Achieving this much is already quite incredible. To create such a thing, one must surely be the most intelligent in the world." The last to jump out of the cabin, the young man spoke with a cheerful grin. He walked up to the forethinker's side and reached out to support the weakened deity. Respect for the elderly and love for the young. It's a fine virtue passed down in Meng village. Speaking earnestly, Amon was like a model young lad. That truly is a fine tradition. After a moment of silence, Prometheus nodded. For some reason, ever since following Heracles back onto this alchemy ship, the forethinker had taken an instant dislike to this young man named Amon. Even though he was eager to learn, seeking knowledge and clever, just like the fire thief once adored in those children, Prometheus still didn't take much of a liking to him. But regardless, this young man had indeed braved the perils of the sea voyage, and together with a couple of other children had rescued him. So, with the nature of the forethinker, it was natural that he couldn't reject him just based on a so-called feeling. The journey of several months. It's finally come to fruition. So where do we go next? Have you thought about it? In an instant, the serious face bloomed again with a vivid smile. Amon looked toward the hero. Chapter 908. Entering the city _2. Heracles thought for a moment, then finally shook his head. Although we share the same goal, how we proceed should not always be decided by me alone. Our next destination is the far west end of the world, but how we get there should be a choice we make together. In that case, how about we make a trip to Silver Moon City first? Crossing the continent is no simple task, and as we can tell from this alchemy ship, a good tool is incredibly important. Moreover, you must have heard of the city's great reputation. Now that we're nearby, don't you want to see its true face? Heracles' expression fluctuated slightly. Listening to Amon's suggestion, it indeed seemed very reasonable to him. The vessel was secondary. More importantly, the great hero really wanted to witness what a truly powerful wizard was like. Besides that, he had another matter that he had not yet shared with anyone else. That is, what had become of the god of West Wind who had given him his last mission. All right. With an affirmative nod, the great hero then turned to look at Prometheus. And the forethinker did not voice any objections. In fact, he was also curious about the human nation capable of creating such advanced constructions. However, thinking of something he had sensed not long ago, Prometheus still cautioned. "I will not interfere with your itinerary, but Heracles, you should remember what I said before. A few days ago, right over this sea, I sensed the power of Zeus being released in the mortal realm. It was brief but very clear. Thousands of years have passed, and his strength has grown stronger. Even now I can no longer gauge the difference in strength between him and the primordial gods. He has firmly secured his position as the divine king. So young man, I know not what has happened to you, nor whether it has any relation to Zeus, but nonetheless I still hope you will be cautious. The real superiority of deities over humans has never been their martial strength or wisdom, but their eternal and undying life and the endless expanse of time. Their true reliance in ruling over all things is their capacity to bear the consequences of failure time and again, compared to their successes. I will. I hold your teachings close to heart. With a serious nod, the great hero did not dismiss the advice lightly. What Prometheus said was right, and before finding solid evidence, he wasn't planning on doing anything rash anyway. Crossing 2 hills and passing through a river. In no time at all, after crossing a barrier somewhere between tangible and intangible, Heracles saw that legendary city. Its enormous silhouette was obscured and hard to distinguish, deliberately hidden from observation from the outside world. Approaching the suburbs, the number of locals and outsiders began to increase. In the sky above, 12 towers slowly rotated clockwise. In the glimpses he caught, the great hero even observed a certain pattern. But due to the lack of knowledge, even after a long observation, Heracles still felt as if he was looking at flowers through the fog. That's a clock, but it's also a calendar. Each day, they should complete 1 rotation around the city. They also exhibit a master-servant dynamic among each other, changing with the phases of the moon and positions of the constellations. To change the world through human effort, such a countercurrent act must come at a great cost. But these towers themselves, they draw energy from all things. Unlike Heracles, even after thousands of years separated from the mortal realm, Prometheus immediately recognized the sophistication of these rotating towers. The trajectories of the sun and moon, the changing constellations, and the turning of chronology. In chaos, from the birth of the 12 Titans, the number itself has contained the meaning of perfection and flawlessness. If the humans of the Bronze Age could build such a marvel, then not even a great flood could have erased them. It sounds quite impressive, but it seems we've been noticed. Lacking the forethinker's vision and learning, the great hero could not discern as much. Chapter 909. Entering the city _3. However, along the way, more and more of Heracles' potential has been uncovered. Although there is no direct evidence, standing here, the great hero feels a sense of being watched. Of course, from this observation, Heracles did not sense any obvious malice. This is normal. That somewhat imperceptible barrier we passed through earlier is likely a tool for identifying newcomers. Anyone who notices the approach of a foreign demigod would probably pay attention. Nodding slightly, Heracles felt the same way. After waiting for a moment without any guards coming to chase him away, the great hero felt the gaze retracting. Thus, without hesitation, Heracles followed the crowd toward the towering bronze arch at the end of their view. Caution is not fear. Since the master of this place did not refuse his visit, he would enter straightforwardly. Walking along the orderly avenue, the majestic gates loomed before him. Several light golden orbs floated in the air, and with his exceptional hearing, Heracles could roughly understand their function. They were alchemy constructs responsible for registering newcomers, aimed at all residents who do not live locally. Regardless of whether they were humans or not, what surprised Heracles somewhat was the discovery of a suspicious presence of a river god. Although true gods traditionally do not consider them equals, it was still surprising to see them here. After all, Silver Moon City's known repudiation of the Olympus faith makes one wonder what these river gods were doing here. Excuse me, sir. Please wait. I am Record Officer number 1587. I will be handling your entry registration and recording your information. May I have your name, please? As he pondered, a light golden orb approached him and a soft female voice emerged from it. Coming back to his senses, the great hero examined the lifeless construct. Heracles. All right then, where do you come from? And what is your purpose for coming to Silver Moon City? I am from Thebes, drawn here by admiration for Silver Moon City's superior alchemy technology. Speaking calmly, the great hero did not concoct any lies. I hope to purchase some appropriate tools to help me travel across thousands of mountains and rivers. Additionally, I would like to experience the sights of this city. Okay, please wait. Your information is now being incorporated into the recognition system. A pass has been issued, but since it has been identified that this is your first visit to Silver Moon City, I will inform you in advance of some essential matters. As long as you do not violate the relevant provisions, all your actions in the city will not be impeded. The soft female voice continued to speak, and the next moment the light golden orb projected a set of text. After briefly scanning it, Heracles found it mainly indicated a number of prohibitions. Fighting within the city was not allowed, some areas were off-limits, and false deity worship was forbidden, among other things. In addition, there were various trading rules and payment methods. If one does not have the officially sanctioned currency of Silver Moon City, bartering is also an acceptable form of trade. There was a scattering of such content, most of which were of little concern. However, beyond these ordinary details, there was one that caught the great hero's attention for a moment longer. This is the pet application clause. What is this? A flicker of curiosity flashed in his eyes. Heracles promptly inquired. As you can see, Silver Moon City is the birthplace of the material realm wizard civilization. Here, many wizards make contracts with harmless demons, turning them into their familiars, or they outright utilize their skills to create one. In the past, such a practice was restricted to the wizards themselves. But thanks to a recent experiment by a certain individual, we will soon open a batch of familiars compatible for contracts with ordinary people. Whether local or not, as long as one meets the standards, they are eligible to apply. I see. Familiars, huh? Sounds quite interesting indeed. Nodding, Heracles expressed his interest, though he didn't actually give it much thought. For ordinary mortals, having such an opportunity is indeed excellent. But for him, it's not as useful. With his current strength, unless it was a powerful demon on par with a deity, it wouldn't mean much. And even if such demons really existed, setting aside the matter of taming them, it's unlikely that others would be willing to sell them. Chapter 910 The Witch and God. Crunch crunch, crunch crunch, crunch crunch. Just as Heracles and his party arrived at the doorstep, inside a special room in the Silver Moon City, the bright afternoon sun shone through the window, pecking at an herby bean, and then sipping on a delicious red tea. As an intelligent bird, Zephyrus felt an unparalleled leisure in his life. No busyness, no tasks, no need to figure out the boss's thoughts, nor the need to maintain good relationships with those often volatile colleagues. The only thing needed was to stay here, cooperating with humans for some harmless minor matters. Empty the mind, indulge at will. For tens of thousands of years, almost never before had the West Wind God felt such heartfelt ease. Crunch crunch. Tui, what a strange taste. So, the taste of these beans has been changed again, huh? Ha, as an intelligent, as a god reluctantly condescending to act as a bird, they actually refuse to make a special edition snack for me. When I occupy this city in the future, I will make them produce products like these according to my taste, without exception. Crunch crunch. Eating another herby bean, Zephyrus made a face as if he'd eaten a fly. A spicy sensation rushed from his mouth to his brain, involuntarily causing him to spit it out. But after the sting passed, he felt a bit high. Herby beans, a special kind of food. It was a specialty snack from Silver Moon City brought to him by a certain woman, rumored to be originally inspired by a dream of a grand sorceress. That powerful mage had once wandered a bizarre world in his youthful dreams as a traveler, encountering battling chess pieces, crowned cards, the overturning of the rabbit kingdom, and a puppet with a growing nose. During this journey, the young grand sorceress tasted many strange and miraculous foods, like lively black dessert frogs that jumped about, candies that crawled like insects, and beans with ever-changing flavors. This undoubtedly matched the variability of dreams. In dreams, no one knows what will happen next. And when a person wakes from a dream, they can quickly distinguish between the dream and reality. However, the young wizard clearly did not wish to differentiate. The dream left a profound impression on him. Thus, he considered the dreams of his youth as an adventure, and from then on, he became determined to excel. The outcome was evident. When the grand sorceress reached the pinnacle of the mortal world, whether the dreams were real or not, he had the power to make them real. Invention after invention came from his hands, and herby beans were one of the products. In the grand sorceress' youthful dreams, they were beans that no one could discern the exact flavor of. Chili flavor, bird droppings flavor, essential oil flavor, along with various other tastes. Therefore, its original name was spice variety beans, but Zephyrus thought the new name he gave it sounded a bit better. Crunch crunch. Ding ding ding. While enjoying a comfortable afternoon, suddenly a rhythmic wind chime sounded. Turning his head, he saw a pink bell ringing not far away. Reluctantly rising from the table, Zephyrus shook off the feathers that had settled. He knew what it meant. In his residence, that kind of bell tone signified the arrival of a visitor. After all, he was just temporarily a bird. Often, people would come to him for various matters. But at this time, they've come again, truly persistent. Ha! It's useless. Mere mortals. How could I possibly agree to her terms?